Defense Minister Gallant and the Chief of Staff of the IDF, Halevi, and held emergency consultations today. That's over the growing movement of top-level reservists refusing to serve, perhaps, over government actions, judicial reforms in this case. And there's more. A group of 800 former Shin Bet intelligence agents issued a joint statement to the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Defense Minister Gallant, urging them to shelve the judicial overhaul, warning of what they termed a, quote, clear and immediate danger, close quote, to Israel's security, and that Israeli forces will be, quote, immediately exposed to investigations and put on trial at international tribunals, close quote, again, if this legislation passes. There's more. Nearly 4,000 IDF reservist soldiers here, volunteers in key positions, have signed letters saying that they'd refused to show up for reserve duty in protest. Now we're talking about at least 200 Air Force pilots and navigators, 90 headquarters staff, dozens of air traffic control operators, drone operators. They've all signed such letters presented to the IDF's upper brass with their names attached. So to get into this issue, it's a sensitive one. It goes to the core of Israeli values here, and it's a tough one to debate, honestly. So we're joined by Brigadier General in the Reserves. That's Israel Relek Shafir, former commander of the Tel Nof Air Base and former combat pilot himself in the Air Force, and Reserve Major in the IDF, Amit Deri, is the founder and the CEO of Reservists on Duty. Huge respect for both of you. Thanks for being with me on this issue. Again, not easy to debate this one, but I want to get your sides of this. Look, starting with you, Relek, I mean, Defense Minister Gallant and the Chief of Staff Halevi in these emergency consultations. Now, have we reached a crisis point with this issue?
Not yet. We're not at the actual crisis. The crisis will probably take place if the legislation passes. This will be a turning point in the eyes of many on the road to turning Israel from democracy into dictatorship of some kind, much like in Hungary and Poland. And so we all urge the government to stop the legislation, and we urge ourselves, if they stop the legislation, to stop the protests and try to find a medium through which we can come to terms, do reforms, but do it on a wide basis.
And that seems to be the key consensus point here. I mean, I want to bring you into this, of course, and highlight something here. We're talking about voluntary reserves. I mean, the guys are showing, men and women, but the combat force is largely made up of men, showing up because they believe in it, because they understand how important it is. They're willing essentially to sacrifice themselves for the country. How foundational is, what's at stake right now? Is it the foundational principles of the IDF right now, the People's Army, all over, what may take place here within the government?
It's a much wider question. It's a question of who we are. Are we a part of the Western world, of the Western democratic liberalism or liberal democracies that have been in place for about 300 years? Or are we going into the Eastern European way? These are the fundamental questions.
Amit, join us in this.
They're very emotional. They're very fundamental and emotional.
What's your take, Amit, on this currently, right now, seeing this growing movement, really?
So I have a lot of respect for Mr. Shafir. That's why I'm waiting in silence. Shafir is a real hero of Israel. And as a young officer, as a major in the IDF, I grew on the stories of Shafir and people like him that protect the country. But unfortunately, first, Mr. Shafir knows, and we all know, that Israel is a democracy and will stay a strong democracy. And just because of that, or specifically because of that, we cannot surrender to dictates from different groups, especially groups of people that are coming from the army. If we are a democracy, like Shafir is saying, so in a democracy, who is dictating what will be is the people. And the people choose a government that now is doing something that is not, Mr. Shafir is not like. And it's okay. And it's okay to protest. And it's okay to go to the streets. And it's okay to come and debate about it. But it's not okay to block main roads. It's not okay to block the airport and preventing from millions of people the freedom of movement. It's not okay at all. And it's endangering the country to refuse going to the army or to reserve duty and encourage young people because that's what these people are doing now, encouraging young people also to refuse in the army and not going to the army. So
that is not true.
Really, it's very sad. It's very sad. It's very sad that, in my opinion, a small group of people led by very strong PR companies that are actually doing all this. People that 20 or 30 years, like the hero, Mr. Shafir, 20 years, correct me if I'm wrong, you never been to reserve duty. But a lot of people that are not serving already on reserve duty, they did their time, and now they are using their experience and their history and actually endangering the country. All of our enemies, the guys from the north, Hezbollah, that are waiting for this weakness
on that
to
point,
show up.
I mean, I want to bring Relic back in on that point of endangering security, because that seems to be the crux of the main argument against what these soldiers are doing right now. They're endangering national security, according to the arguments. Is it not the right way to do this? That shouldn't it be better to organize for the next election, which may not be far off, beat this at the ballot box, not harm national security? What's your response to that, Relic?
I'll just correct two things. I've been doing reserve duty for the last 20 years, part of which is an F-15 pilot. After I left the military for several years, and we're not asking people to refuse. We're telling people who are volunteers that if they find it impossible for them to continue, then we will support them. We don't call them. It's a personal call. But the idea is that this government has decided not to change the laws. It's decided to change the whole structure of Israeli society. You know that we have a weak democracy and we don't have two houses of parliaments. We have a full control of the government of the House of Parliament. And our judicial, we don't have a constitution. And so the judicial, a lot of times, it is a position where the government or the parliament doesn't want to make decisions, and then it pushes it over to judiciary. Sure, these things have to be corrected, but not shoved down the throat within a couple of weeks, which is what the government was trying to do. And we know exactly why it was trying to do this. We may not have the next elections because the way that this government is pushing new laws is such that they can postpone the elections, overcome the judiciary in the decision, and we won't have elections. That is the point.
Look, I mean, to come back to you on this, one of your opening statements here saying, look, we all know it's a strong democracy. It will remain a strong democracy, as you put it. The people out protesting right now that's exactly the crux of their concern, that democracy is being eroded right now, that there won't always be just a strong democracy, that in fact that the outcome of these bills will be a weakened democracy. So where else, how do you look your brethren in the eye here, of the armed forces, to say, calm the concerns?
We have put up a group which we call Bereshit, which has our people from the left, from the center, from the right, with a lot of rabbis who come from the right. We've already put out a paper calling for what we agree on.
I mean, please feel free to chime in. And I'm sorry to speak. I know this is a Zoom debate, so I want to make sure to facilitate you.
All these papers and signing and petitions, that's already been done a year and something ago. That was elections. It's called elections in Israel, a democracy. People voted. They voted for a government. And sometimes it's a left-wing government, sometimes it's right-wing government. And we all know, and Mr. Shafir knows also, that in the past, both left-wing and right-wing governments thought that must be a change in the way our system, the judges, how they nominate themselves, how it works. Also, people from the left, like Gideon Saar, like Yair Lapid himself, and others, said that need to be a change. If you look on the polls of the Israeli public, what they think, on what is their trust in the system today, by the way, in a lot of systems in Israel, except of the IDF, and that's what is Mr. Shafir is doing now with his friends. The only place that the Israeli public, really the only strong institute that the Israeli public shows a lot of trust was the IDF until now, more than 70-something%, opposite to 40 or 30-something% to other systems like the police and others. So it's okay to protest. It's okay to go and change the government when it's time of elections. It's okay to even to go to all these ministers to their home and to show the to protest next to their homes and say this is not what we want for our country. But there is a limit. What you are suggesting, Mr. Shafir, is to destroy the democracy from within and endanger the state by refusing going to the IDF, by showing our enemies.
I'm sorry, but you're distorting reality. The reason that there's a lower approval rate for the legal system is because it has been under attack for the few years, but it is still 3 times more than for politicians. And the military that you're talking about, if Netanyahu and his government think that by coercing their way through changing the structural system, obviously about 70% of Israelis, including a third of the Likud members, think that this change of structure should be abolished now and the process will stop. And we should come together and find a way to reform the system in a manner which has the public support. And the elections themselves were not about changing the structural system. Absolutely not.
We are not. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay, sir. We are not debating the reform and how it should be executed, and if at all. We are debating what are the measures that you are taking and others are taking that actually endangering the country by using the army.
I'm sorry. We're civilians who are calling on people who do not agree with the government and feel that they cannot volunteer for duty anymore.
That's a semantic trick. The way you say that, you understand
it's not
that
semantic.
actually.
I'm sorry. You can't push it down my throat. I'm sorry. This is a volunteer. No, I'm sorry. No, you're trying to push your agenda, and it's absolutely not true. I'm sorry. You cannot push your agenda down my throat. I'm sorry.
It's not my agenda. And again, we are not debating the reform. We are debating whether it's legitimate to use. Think about what will happen, because at the end of the day, I believe we're strong enough. I trust you, and I believe you trust people like me, that this country will continue to exist. And we will go to the army, and we will save and make sure that Israel will be a democracy. What will happen next time on the next debate will be that other groups from the right wing, from the center, whatever, when there will be a political debate, and they will decide like you that
this is not a political debate. This is a national debate. If, by the way, there is a decision, if there's a decision that in the military you won't have kosher food anymore and religious people will go out in protestation, I will go with them, because this is a structural change.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a legal system. We're talking about structural change.
People at the time, on 2005, people thought that evacuating Gaza Strip from
running out of time, gentlemen.
Jewish.
There was a public support.
I want to give you as much time as I could on this. Relek Shafir, Amit Deri, fascinating to have you. Tough topic. Thank you for joining us.